Hey everyone, and welcome back to my main channel. The video you're about to watch is a compilation of shorts that were originally posted over on my second channel, More Rachel Oates, and that are still slowly being posted over on my Instagram account at Rachel Oates with a 0 instead of an O. However, I know not everyone is subscribed to those channels, I know not everyone likes shorts, and I know not everyone has Instagram, and people still wanted to see them, so I thought I would put them into a longer format video where you could enjoy them all in one go. And basically what you're about to see is a bunch of book recommendations and also some not so much recommendations. They're basically a series of mini reviews of books that I've read throughout 2024. Ones that I found notable, ones that I wanted to talk about for one reason or another. There's a mixture of fiction, non-fiction and poetry in here. Some books I really liked, some books I didn't like as much. And it's just hopefully a bit of a mix to give you a few recommendations, things you might want to go out and read, things you might want to avoid, just to share some thoughts. I just wanted to end the year on some more digestible, light-hearted content that is easier to produce, and here you go. I really hope you enjoy this. Thanks for watching. I thought I'd end this year by doing a really quick series here on my Instagram account and over on my second channel, where I do really quick reviews of some of my kind of favourite and notable books that I've read this year in 2024. One of the first things I want to bring up is a series of comics that I discovered this year that are just not at all what I expected, and that is the Ice Cream Man series. I read something like the first 7 volumes of the comic, and it's really good. It's not at all what I expected. If you like kind of horror anthologies with stories that are only kind of loosely connected, but you still have these like themes running through the whole thing, they're a really good place to start. They're bizarre, they're incredibly surreal at times, but they're so creative, and that they play around with different art styles, different styles of storytelling, different narrative structures. You have like issues where the entire story is told through a palindrome, so you see the panels going forward one way and then you see them back, and they're the exact same panels but they tell a different story depending on which way you read it. You have some that have this like triptych effect going on where you're seeing 3 stories at once, all using different colours and different layouts on the same page to tell different stories. They're just very creative, they're very fun, and I really like what the series was doing. Some of the issues are better than others. Some of them are homages to other popular kind of surrealist stories and horror stories and stuff like that. Like, there's definitely a whole reference to Kafka's Metamorphosis in one of the stories. In this case, a cockroach becomes human and then suddenly has to deal with all the pressures that a human faces when he was so happy before being a cockroach. And it's just absolutely fantastic. I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed this series, and I can't wait to carry on reading it. Another quick book review for you here, and one of my favourite books I read this year that really surprised me was Sarah Priscus's Groupies. I went into this not knowing what to think, thinking maybe it would be a bit of a trashy read, a bit of an easy read, but no, it ended up being a really interesting book. Follows a young woman who becomes basically a groupie to this rock band that she loves in the 70s, and all the drama and pain and suffering and addiction issues and men using women and all this like nightmarish stuff that comes with that lifestyle. She's a photographer, which I really liked and really related to, but also it was really nice to have a book that could have very been easily just about the men, just about, ooh, these rock stars are so great, they did this, and they, like, the men were kind of a background character, and instead what was at the forefront was the women and how deep and complex they all were, their interesting backstories, the lives that they had before they became groupies and also during, the relationships between them. There were some really beautifully developed female characters in this. That a lot of them were victims, a lot of them were incredibly strong, and sometimes it was hard to see where the line was between victim and oppressor, and it was very complex. There's not a lot of good people in this book, but there are real complex characters, and I really enjoyed it. I kind of wish the ending had a few more consequences for a little bit of the bad behaviour that went on, but overall, a great read, really enjoyed it, would recommend. Another book that I want to quickly chat and recommend to you guys that I've read this year is Midnight in Chernobyl by Adam Higginbotham. This is a dense book. It is big, it is slow-paced, it is full of technical, sciencey information about what actually happened at Chernobyl, where the problems were, how Chernobyl even got, the power plant got built in the first place, the whole building of the city, the politics behind it. It is deep, it is dense, it is very dark, and it is very well written. The research is great, the storytelling throughout it, while still being so dense and heavy with pretty, like, tough science, the storytelling that he still managed to bring into it was fantastic. He made the people feel so, well, the people are real, but he really made you feel sorry for them and understand the stresses that a lot of them were under. It's kind of heartbreaking because you realise just how not only destructive this entire tragedy was, but how preventable it could have been with different political leaders, different men in charge, different agendas in different places, if people had just put a little bit of more time or effort or money into certain things, you know? It was really, really eye-opening. It's not an easy read. It's not one you'll get through in a couple of days. I really had to sit down with this over a couple of weeks and just take it in a chapter at a time, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And if you like sciencey content, if you're interested in what happened with the whole Chernobyl meltdown and everything, then I cannot recommend the book enough. Really, really good. This was one of the last books I've read, well, I've literally just finished it this weekend, and I devoured this book in like 2 days. It is so good. This is Unmentionable by Therese O'Neill. It is the Victorian Lady's Guide to Sex, Marriage and Manners, and it is fantastic. It is so funny, it is so snarky. I love the sense of humour in this book, but it's also packed with really, really interesting information and stuff about what it would have been like to be a woman living at various points in the Victorian era in different classes and places all over the world, and you know, all these different women, what were their different experiences like? This is all the stuff that you've always wanted to know but aren't in the boring regular textbooks, because it is aimed mostly at women and people who are assigned female at birth, you know? It talks about how they actually dealt with their periods, what makeup was used and why it had so much lead in it. It talks about how women at the time used weird things for contraception like crocodile dung. I mean, it might work, but not for the reasons they expected. It talks about how the best way to attract a man is to just keep your mouth shut and not say anything, which may be where I've been going wrong all these years. It talks about how widespread cocaine was as a medicine and a cure for all these kinds of crazy things, probably caused by your womb, because whatever's going on in your life, it's probably hysteria. You've got a wandering womb, you've got something, the problem's in your womb is what I'm saying. Blame everything on the uterus. The Victorians did. One of the chapters I found most interesting that really surprised me, I didn't expect to find it so good, was about the history of the bathroom and like how we got bathrooms as we know them today. Because, you know, before, having an entire room for going to the toilet and washing and taking care of yourself was kind of unheard of until the Victorian era. It's fascinating. So if you want a book that is packed full of information that will give you a bit of a feminist perspective on what it was really like to be a woman back in the Victorian era, but it's also really fun and entertaining, then I cannot recommend Unmentionable enough. I've had a little bit of a slow year for reading poetry this year, but one of my favourite collections that I found was this one, The Book of Dog Poems. This was collected by Sarah Maycock and Anna Sampson. You know I love Anna Sampson's collections. I've recommended quite a few of hers many times. And this collection is just, it's so lovely, it's so heartwarming. I haven't really spoken about it too publicly, but it's been a tough year this year, especially towards the end of it, because Kyra got quite ill for a couple of weeks and she wasn't eating properly, and I was really worried about her. It's hard when you've got an elderly dog, I think, because, you know, even like little illnesses can seem so, and be so much worse. So I was really worried about her for a bit. She's fine now, absolutely okay. Nothing to worry about. It was just a little bug she had that just went on for a bit long. But I found that in that time that she was really ill, this collection was a real comfort, and I'd sit there and read poems to her while she wasn't feeling well. And yeah, I think it really helped both of us. If you're a dog lover, this is just a beautiful collection. It has the most gorgeous little watercolour illustrations alongside the poems. There's poems of various lengths, styles. There's something in here for everyone if you like dogs. And coming away from this, I also ended up feeling inspired enough to write a poem that I've been trying to write for ages, and that's one about Kyra. And it's a silly poem. It's full of puns and wordplay and inside jokes between me and her, but it's a really heartfelt poem that I don't think I would have managed to get through without this book. That poem's called Fairy Tale, and it's in my second book, which is coming out very soon. If you're looking for a non-fiction book recommendation, then one of my favourite books that I've read this year is Wedded Wife, a Feminist History of Marriage by Rachel E. Lennon. Even if she spells her Rachel the wrong way, it's a good book. I originally read this as part of researching one or several videos I did earlier in the year, but I ended up just sitting down and like going back and properly reading the book the whole way. Because when I'm researching, sometimes I skim a little bit and I go to the chapters I need, but this one I went back and like properly took my time and read the whole thing and really, really enjoyed it. It was thoroughly eye-opening, and I think a lot of you know my stance on marriage and how, like, you know, I like romance and love, and I want a long-term relationship, but I just don't want legal marriage. That's not for me. And this book kind of cemented that position for me, because it showed me the history of marriage and how a lot of the times things have been used around marriage to control women and oppress women, and I don't really want to be a part of that. Even today, as things are getting more equal, they're still not completely equal, and I just personally don't see the benefit of a legal marriage. I don't see that there's anything I can get from that I can't just get from a loving relationship. I really enjoyed the discussions in this about everything from like proposals and why should it always be the man who proposes, to everything else like you know, splitting assets. How in a relationship do you split things like household chores if you want to live together? How even wedding day traditions can have these sexist undertones, and we kind of just accept some of them without really questioning, well, where did this come from? Why is this a tradition? What does this actually mean for the women involved? And obviously not all of it's bad. It's not. For a lot of people, marriage is a great thing and it's a really empowering thing for a lot of women. We can't ignore that. But there is just a lot to consider, and this book really opened my eyes in a good way. Okay, the recommendation in this short video is a little bit different to the others I've been doing in this series, because I'm not just going to talk about one book, but three that have been really, really helpful in me researching a lot of the stuff that went into my new book, which is coming out in December, called Outside. And a lot of that book focuses on retellings of fairy tales done through poetry as like analogies for stuff going on in my own life. So as part of that, I ended up doing a lot of research into the origins of fairy tales, which is something I've done a little bit before. I've made videos on it and stuff like that, but three books in particular were really, really helpful for me. First was The Uses of Enchantment by Bruno Bettelheim. This is one I've spoken about in videos before. It leans a little too much into like Freudian takes on everything and Freudian interpretations of fairy tales for my liking. It's like, it feels like everything is like, and it comes back to when Freud said, which is maybe a bit much, but on the whole, it is really good. It's really useful. It will take you through different kinds of fairy tale, the meanings behind them, and how a lot of them were used as like stories for teaching about real life and that sort of thing in a good way. It's great. Another one is The Witch Must Die, The Hidden Meaning of Fairy Tales by Sheldon Kashdan. I originally read this when I was in my final year of uni and came back to it this year for this book, and a little less Freudian than Bettelheim, which is good, and still very, very interesting. Same sort of format. The last one is a little older, a little more outdated. Well, no, not outdated, that's the wrong word. A little more classic, if you will. And that is From the Beast to the Blonde on Fairy Tales and Their Tellers by Marina Warner. This one looks a little more at the history of how fairy tales were told to each other, whereas these two are a little more about like the literary interpretations of fairy tale. Well, all the books do both, but this one is a little more history focused. This is a little more literary analysis-ish, I guess you could say that. But either way, all three are fantastic and really helped me with my new book, and I would recommend them all. They're great. Of course, there are also some books I read this year that I just didn't like or was kind of indifferent towards. And one of them, which it feels like a whole lot of nothing, so I'm not even sure why I'm making a video about this one specifically. But one of the books that I kind of just want to talk about as a average one-ish is just a stupid little YA romance book that I read called Dungeons and Drama by Christy Boyce. So it's just a book. It's fine. I figured I spend so long reviewing terrible romance and erotica in a lot of my videos and pointing out, oh, this is harmful, this is harmful, this is why this is dangerous, this is why this is poorly written, that I was like, can I just find something in the romance genre that like is healthy and happy and not a danger? So I went looking, and this one had pretty good reviews, and it was fine. I feel like the problem is I'm never going to be a romance reader in general. I say that. I've read a few books with romance. I've read a couple of the Outlander books. They're fine. I can prefer the time travel element in them than anything else. But, yeah, I just don't think I'm ever going to be a romance reader. This one was about this teenage girl who's like a little theatre kid, and she meets this guy who's nerdy and working in her dad's game shop, like a board game shop. Then she gets sucked into the world of D&D, and it's kind of like an enemies to lovers thing, a forced relationship thing. It just felt like instead of them being real characters, they were just molded to fit well-established tropes so that people would like tick it off, be like, oh, I like this, I'll read this. Like, it didn't feel like there was actually a story there that needed telling. It was all just a bit bland. Yes, even this relationship was a little bit toxic and unhealthy, which, you know, I can't enjoy that. I can't. So overall, it wasn't the most harmful book I've ever read. It was no Zodiac Academy, you know, but it was whatever. And I think what I've learnt this year is that I'm just not a fan of romance books. I like a romance subplot, that's fine. I'm a big romantic in my personal life. I love that. But yeah, romance books I just don't think are for me. And that's okay. Okay, another book I read this year that I want to talk about quickly is Janice Hallett's The Examiner. Now, I've recommended some of Janice's books before because they're kind of fun modern takes on the epistolary novel. So she tells the story through things like text messages to each other, WhatsApp group chats, emails sent, newspaper articles. In this one there's like some student essays and things like that, and it's a really fun way of telling the story where you're kind of picking up these clues by yourself. My problem I have with a lot of Janice's books is that she over-explains to the audience. So she'll have these little interludes where two characters who are kind of detached from the main plot will be like, ooh, did you read this? Ooh, so what's happening here is, and then she over-explains like we're stupid, and I'm like, can you just not? Like, we all read it, we were all there, we all know what's happening. That said, that little frustration aside, I do quite enjoy a lot of her books. I find the stories and the mysteries really interesting. This one is about a bunch of students on an art MA program, all from different stages in their life, all from different backgrounds. They come together and, you know, there's a lot of drama. And as it goes on, few little spoilers here, it turns out one of the students might have gone missing, they might have been killed. Ooh, what's happened? There's a whole big conspiracy, there's crimes, there's political stuff going on, and the plot itself is actually really, really good. Again, massive spoiler here. There comes a twist about 3/4 of the way through the book where we have thought for a lot of this book, one of these characters is just kind of stupid and socially unaware and a little bit annoying and irritating, and oh, she's always asking for stuff. And like, turns out she is completely blind, which is why she has to ask for clarification on a lot of things. It's why she didn't know if one of the students was actually in the room with her or not. It's why it makes sense. All these things are suddenly explained. On the one hand, it was nice to have a character with a disability that, like, it wasn't made their entire focal point. Like, you know, she had all these other things going for her other than her not being able to see. But on the other hand, I'm not sure how I feel about, like, a disability being used as a plot twist. That's still, I don't know how I feel about it. But overall, like I say, it's not my favourite of Janice Hallett's books. I would still recommend, if people want to try her stuff, either The Mystery of the Appleton Angels or The Appeal, the original one, not the Christmas short one. That wasn't great. They are, like I say, fun modern epistolary novels. They are quirky and unique, but also, you know, they're not perfect books. I do have a few problems with them, but, you know, I would say a solid 3.5 stars out of 5. Not bad. Not that I give star ratings very often, you know, just why not? I'm a big fan of crime books and crime thrillers. I find they're just relaxing, they're easy to read. It's nice to, like, see a bad guy get his comeuppance, that sort of thing. So they are kind of my comfort read. And 2 books I read this year that really surprised me with how much I enjoyed them were Benjamin Stevenson's Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone and Everyone on This Train is a Suspect. They're great. They're set in Australia. This guy is, basically he writes about how to write crime fiction. Does that make sense? So he's one of these people who will write little ebooks on Amazon being like, okay, here's all the tropes in a crime book. Here's all the, you know, how to structure a whodunit, all that sort of thing. And he finds himself suddenly in the middle of a big whodunit, a big mystery surrounding his family, and there's murders, there's drama, there's mysteries, and he kind of uses his knowledge a little bit of the crime genre to, like, apply to his real life in the fictional world. And it's all very, like, self-aware and fun, and it's a nice little, what's the word I'm looking for? It feels like both a parody of an homage to and just a general critique of the crime genre in general, but all done with a lot of humour and a lot of heart, and it's really, really fun, and I just really enjoyed the books. Would definitely recommend. You know, I think the first book that I read this year was Kirsten White's Mr. Magic, and it's the one book that has like stuck with me throughout the whole year, and I still have nightmares about, and it gets in my head. It is so damn atmospheric and creepy, and I just can't stop thinking about it, even nearly a year on. So you guys might know that I have like a real weakness for like old children's TV programs. Like they're my comfort watch. Like we once did a whole live stream where we watched like intros to cartoons like, you know, the Smurfs and Bertha, Poddington Peas. It was really, really fun. Like it was great. So I have like a lot of happy feelings around that sort of thing. And what happens in this book is there was a woman who's grown up, and when she was a kid, she was on one of these kids' TV shows called Mr. Magic. And then one day something happened, her sister went missing, the entire TV show kind of shut down, and no one quite knew what was going on. These TV shows were always on TV, and it seemed to have gone back to like, you know, basically since TV started, it was always there, always on, but then no one has any tapes of it, everyone can remember it, but no one has actually seen any of these episodes as an adult. So eventually the other kids that she was on the TV show with get back in touch with her, and they're like, we're doing a reunion podcast, and it's back in the house where it was all filmed, and it turns out that there is some creepy, supernatural, magic-y stuff going on, and it is just creepy as hell. It's got the nostalgia factor, it's got the creepiness of everything, so everything's so surreal and weird and it's great. There are a few things I find scarier than creepy horror surrounding kids. I mean, I just find kids quite scary in general, but horror kids, they're the worst. They just get under my skin for some reason, and this book taps into that really well for me. I really liked that. There's a lot of kind of play with like light and shadows and things that you can't quite see, and things that like, did you see it out of the corner of your eye? Did you not? Are you being watched? Are you not? Is someone there? Are they not? I love it. Also, horror about like old recordings and found footage and that sort of thing always gets to me, so it does play into that a little bit. And overall, I just found it absolutely fascinating. I was always guessing about the motivations of different characters, and I never quite knew who I could trust throughout the whole book. It was done so well, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And like I say, a year on, I still have nightmares from that book, so can't recommend it enough.